On the night we got our marriage certificate, I witnessed my husband taking his long-lost first love into a hotel. I chose to believe him and didn't make a scene, but my obedience didn't earn me his explanation. Instead, I waited for the first love to post on his social media. People who are meant to be together will always meet again. Thank you for your determination, which allows me to come back to your side. 1. Watching Hugo check into a hotel with another woman. I covered my mouth, unable to hold back the tears. Trembling, I sent the message, "Do you really love me?" All I got was silence from Hugo. Looking at the unread message, I began to doubt how much I really meant to Hugo. Or was I, from the beginning, just a backup option for him to call on and dismiss at will? Returning to our new house, looking at the red sheet characters all over the wall, I finally broke down and cried out loud. After tearing down the glaring red characters like a madwoman, I sent a message to Hugo with excessive calmness. "The wedding banquet is off. We'll get a divorce tomorrow." I didn't care whether Hugo read it or not. Cheating men are dirty and don't deserve any of my emotions. After sending the message, I immediately informed my parents. They were shocked by my decision, and even more unbelievable, that Hugo would check into a hotel with another woman on the night of our marriage registration. Indeed, everyone who knew Hugo had once said to me, "Being able to marry Hugo is your blessing. You must cherish such a good man." Just because Hugo founded a listed company at a young age, he was gentle, handsome, and restrained. Everyone thought that I was not good enough for Hugo. I once lowered my stance again and again in front of Hugo because of his superior conditions. For the sake of love, I humbled myself to the dust. It was Hugo who personally killed this kind of me, until I threw out the photos. Faced with the undeniable facts, my parents supported me. Do what you want to do. Your parents will always be your strong backing. After smashing all the things prepared for the wedding in the new house, I packed all my luggage and returned to my own place. The missing Hugo didn't show up at my door until 3 days later. He carried a tired aura, and his cold eyes were full of impatience. "What kind of tantrum are you throwing?" I no longer restrained all my emotions like before. I suppressed my eyes and called him with a sarcastic smile. "Soon-to-be ex-husband, are you finally free to divorce me?" Hugo had never seen me like this. After a moment of thought flashed through his eyes, he hesitated and wanted to pull my hand. "Do you know how many things I need to deal with if you say divorce?" He lowered his stance slightly and rarely spoke gently and softly. "Be good, don't cause me any more trouble." In his eyes, I was like an obedient pet dog. As long as he said a few nice words, it seemed that I would be led away by him. Being able to deal with 2 women at the same time, how can it not be troublesome? We are going to get a divorce anyway. Save some energy to coax other women. I forcefully slapped away his outstretched hand, my words full of sarcasm. "Don't touch me. Please respect yourself. It's not troublesome to check into a hotel with another woman after registering for marriage, but it's troublesome to get a divorce?" Hugo was irritated by my reaction. He frowned, and it was the first time I was physiologically disgusted by his touch. He frowned, his face full of displeasure, his eyes as black as an unfathomable well. "Kayla, can you only think about these dirty things? You are now in such an ugly state. What is the difference between you and a crazy woman who has lost her mind?" 2. Hugo only blamed me, but didn't offer any explanation for his behavior. But I didn't want to offer any more self-justification. I let out a cold laugh. "Yes, I'm dirty. I'm a crazy woman and not worthy of CEO Hugo. CEO Hugo should go find other gentle and sweet women to spend the rest of his life with." This was the first time Hugo had seen my sharp side. In surprise, he took a deep breath and then exhaled heavily. "Kayla, even being willful has its limits. Can't we talk about anything properly? If you get a divorce, what about my parents?" Hugo really understood me, but his parents were indeed a soft spot that I couldn't completely let go of. Although Hugo was always cold to me, his parents genuinely liked me. The gifts and red envelopes they gave me during the holidays, and the delicious meals they personally cooked for me, often made me feel flattered. Looking at Hugo's deep and meaningful gaze, I pursed my lips. "I just feel that I should talk to Uncle and Aunt in person." Hugo seemed to smile smugly. I was driven home by Hugo, and when I entered the door, I saw his mother's gentle and warm smile. "Kayla, why are you here suddenly? I have to quickly prepare some of your favorite dishes." Hugo's father also rushed over after hearing the news. "You're really something, bringing Kayla back for dinner without notifying me in advance." In the past, I would have already taken uncle and aunt's arms and acted coquettishly with them. But when I thought of the scene of Hugo checking into a hotel with that woman, I felt a lump in my throat and a bitter feeling in my heart. Uncle and aunt didn't notice my restraint and were busy making tea and preparing fruit. Hugo also shed his previous arrogance. He twisted a hot towel to help me wipe my hands. I didn't want to refuse, so I turned my face away and thanked him stiffly. Hugo was slightly stunned, his expression complicated. "Do you have to be so polite with me?" I directly ignored his actions and familiarly entered the room. I went to Hugo's mother's side, my throat feeling sore. "Auntie, don't be busy." Hugo's mother lovingly touched my face. "Silly girl, you should change your address and call me Mom." Once I was so eager for the day I could change my address. But now, how should I tell them? Looking at their smiling faces, I felt even more guilty. The woman who will change her address to call them Mom and Dad in the future is actually someone else. I stood there blankly, and the next second, a pair of warm arms wrapped around my waist. "Tell Mom what you want to eat, and let her make it for you." My body stiffened. Hugo actually hugged me silently from behind. That warm embrace that once made me infinitely attached, at this moment, was like a stove roasting me, making me feel like I was sitting on pins and needles. I endured the discomfort and gritted my teeth, trying to break open Hugo's hand. This silent contest lasted until Hugo's mother walked away. I jumped out of his arms as if I had been electrocuted, my eyes filled with undisguised anger. "CEO Hugo," I said, "please respect yourself and me a little." Hugo's face, which was originally smiling, instantly covered with a haze. He flattened his lips and tried his best to restrain the ups and downs in his tone. "Are you deliberately trying to make me estranged from you, and then make me uncomfortable?" He took a step forward, and his sharp aura forced me to retreat. "Kayla, what tricks are you playing with me?" This self-righteous man. I took a deep breath, just about to refute Hugo. But Hugo's bedroom door opened at this moment. His long-lost first love, Laura, whom he had never forgotten, stretched her waist and walked from his bedroom towards us. Seeing me, her eyes lit up. "Sister Kayla, why are you here suddenly?" She wasn't embarrassed at all and squeezed up to Hugo's side, inviting me. "My aunt and uncle are going to cook hot pot for me tonight. Would you like to join us?" Seeing Laura wearing the pajamas I bought for Hugo, the bitterness in my throat instantly surged into a nauseating disgust. 3. Laura even enthusiastically pulled me to sit down at the table. "Sister Kayla, please stay and eat with us. Auntie's cooking is the best. You should try it soon." Her tone made it seem like she was the hostess of the house. Hugo didn't say a word, and even looked at Laura pamperly, not caring about my feelings at all. I sat down silently. When it was time to eat, Hugo's mother brought the fresh fish to Hugo. "Kayla loves fish the most. This fish is delicious but has many bones. Please help Kayla pick out the bones." I used to act coquettishly and ask Hugo if he could help me pick out fish bones. But Hugo was aloof. "If there are many bones, don't eat it. Why do you still eat it when you clearly too much trouble?" He always used his principles and theories to bind me. In order to please him, I never ate fish in front of him again. Unexpectedly, until now, Hugo still had that indifferent tone. "If you too many thorns, don't eat it. You're not a child anymore. Why do you need help picking out bones?" I no longer pushed the fish away obediently like before. Instead, I brought the fish in front of me and began to eat it heartily. "Thank you, Auntie. I'm good at eating fish, and I don't need anyone to help me pick out the bones." Hugo glanced at me in confusion. It was as if he was saying, "I thought you didn't like eating fish. How would he know that I was just suppressing myself for his sake?" Seeing me eating fish, Laura held her face and pretended to be envious. "Sister Kayla is so good at eating fish. I can't do it. I always get stuck by fish bones. I'm really stupid, so although I love fish, I've never dared to eat it much." As soon as Laura finished speaking, Hugo reached over and snatched the fish in front of me. He picked a few pieces of fish meat into his own plate and began to concentrate on helping Laura pick out the bones. Laura smiled sweetly. I knew Brother Hugo was the best to me. After speaking, she leaned closer and opened her mouth. Ah. Hugo smiled pamperly, then picked up a chopstick of fish and fed it to Laura's mouth. What a sweet couple. Such an ironic scene, I laughed silently. Hugo's father blamed Hugo. Can't you take good care of Kayla? She is your wife now. I shook my head and stood up with a faint smile. Uncle, there is something I think I must make clear. I am already preparing to divorce Hugo, so I am not his wife, and I can no longer change my address to call you Mom and Dad. It was like a bolt from the blue. Hugo's mother's chopsticks fell to the ground from her hand. Kayla, you? Are you kidding us? Hugo clenched his chopsticks, his back of his hand showing blue veins, as if he was brewing something. But before he could speak, Laura rushed over. Sister Kayla, what are you talking about? Why are you divorcing Brother Hugo for no reason? Her eyes were even redder than mine. No matter what Hugo did to make you angry, I apologize for him. Please don't be angry with him, okay? I took Laura's hand off me with disgust. What did he do with you in the hotel? Don't you know best? Laura's face stiffened, embarrassed and pitiful. Seeing Laura being bullied, Hugo slapped the table and threw away his chopsticks, roaring at me. Kayla, if you have paranoia, go to the hospital for treatment. If you are dirty, you will see everything as dirty. How many times have I told you? I have always only regarded Kayla as my best sister. Hugo was emotionally stable and rarely got angry and cursed. Seeing him stand up for Laura and protect her behind him, my heart, which had already died, shattered once again. 4. Hugo, you can deceive me, but don't deceive yourself. I didn't want to argue with Hugo any further. Uncle and Auntie, thank you for taking care of me all this time. I'm sorry that I can't be with you any longer. I hope you understand. While the two elders were still in a daze, I rushed out the door, not wanting to see Laura's green tea look of trembling in Hugo's arms. I returned home in a mess, only to see my mother waiting for me with my favorite cake. My baby has been wronged. Seeing my mother's warm smile, I felt greatly comforted. My mother stayed with me for a long time before finally asking cautiously, Kayla, how did you find out that Hugo went to a hotel with someone else? I sighed. That day Hugo said he was going to receive a big client and couldn't meet me at night. I remembered that he was prone to stomach pain, so I wanted to bring him some stomach medicine and sobering medicine. No matter what, I still knew Hugo well. I knew where the high-end hotel he would take his clients to was, so I took a taxi directly there. But it was such a coincidence. Or perhaps even God couldn't bear to watch it any longer and wanted me to recognize the truth. Anyway, I watched him take Laura into the hotel with my own eyes. My mother hugged me, gently stroking my back like she was coaxing a child. People will always encounter setbacks and meet the wrong people. My daughter, never deny yourself because of this. You are no worse than Hugo, and you don't have to be depressed for a flawed product. My mother's encouragement and embrace made me even more awake. Indeed, why should I be for a scumbag? Let yourself fall to the bottom? After taking 2 days off and having my mother accompany me for 2 days, when I returned to the company, I could no longer see the sadness and fatigue on my face. Enthusiastic colleagues thought I was immersed in the joy of my new marriage and joked, "Where do you plan to go for your honeymoon? President Hugo should take you abroad, right? Have you considered having a honeymoon baby double happiness?" I smiled without saying a word and calmly accepted everyone's kind blessings. My life doesn't need so many viewers, and I don't want my feelings to become other people's after-dinner gossip. Outsiders have no right to interfere in our lives, my feelings. I can make it public after the successful divorce. In the next period of time, work became the place where I regained my vitality. When I put my energy into my career and focused on personal improvement, those loves and hates related to Hugo will slowly no longer affect my emotions. The only trouble is that Hugo has been dragging his feet and is unwilling to go with me to get a divorce certificate. Helpless, I entrusted a lawyer to send him a legal letter. If you are unwilling to follow normal procedures, then let's see you in court. My ruthlessness. Finally, Hugo showed up. But when I saw him holding my favorite white roses appearing at the door, the shock turned into me. Is this here to get a divorce or to propose? What I didn't expect even more. Hugo actually lowered his noble head and apologized to me in a somewhat humble tone. I'm sorry, Kayla. I was wrong before, and I didn't handle it well enough. For the sake of our past relationship, can you forgive me? 5. The self-centered and elite CEO Hugo. He actually knows how to say sorry. You know, in the past, every time there was a dispute, I could only rely on my humble admission of mistakes and unconditional accommodation to keep the relationship stable. Seeing Hugo looking at me nervously, I was in a trance. Hugo, maybe he really doesn't want to divorce me. But why? After the divorce, it's not good to be with Laura openly? Just thinking of Laura, the thorn that cannot be removed. Hugo spoke softly again. My parents don't want us to divorce just after we got married. You should know that you are the most perfect daughter-in-law candidate in their hearts. Even for my parents, can you take back your decision? I was stunned. Then I laughed mockingly. It seems that I was being sentimental. I straightened my back and looked at Hugo coldly. Your parents should be comforted by you, their son, instead of expecting me, who has nothing to do with you, to do it. I don't need your apology. I just need you to go through the divorce procedures with me as soon as possible. Hugo vaguely showed his condescending impatience again. Money, houses, cars, career connections, what I have I can give you. What are you dissatisfied with that you have to divorce me? Yes, Hugo has everything, a perfect match that countless girls dream of. But it is such a person who was born and lived in Rome. But he doesn't understand the most basic loyalty and respect. In terms of material things, maybe you have everything. I express my contempt for Hugo from the bottom of my heart. But you don't have a good character, and the most basic moral character of being a person. Seeing your hypocritical and ungrateful appearance, I only feel nauseous and disgusted. What I want he can't give me. This is the first time I have said such harsh words to Hugo, and showed such a disgusted expression. Hugo was stunned on the spot. The roses also fell from his hand. The petals scattered one by one. I stepped on the flowers brought by Hugo and entered the door quickly without any nostalgia. Through the camera on the door, I saw Hugo loosening his ly and messing up his hair. He stood at my door for a long time, unwilling to leave. Obviously, I once looked forward to Hugo being more attentive to me. But looking at Hugo's confused look now, I only feel a deep sense of sadness in my heart. Hugo stood there for a long time and finally left. I sent a text message to Hugo again, asking him to get a divorce with me as soon as possible. We have signed a prenuptial agreement. I don't want a penny of your money. Please be merciful and let me go, can you? My wording is as mean and tough as possible. Hugo still didn't reply. Unexpectedly, early the next morning, I saw Hugo downstairs. He leaned against the car door, posing as if he was going to pick me up from work. Get in the car. It's just that his originally somewhat smug smile disappeared immediately when he saw my dress. He took off his sunglasses and stared at me unhappily. Kayla, why are you dressed like this? 6. I tugged at the new strapless dress and confidently retorted, is there a problem? I knew that Hugo thought it was not decent or even too revealing. Once, I was also a girl who loved beauty and pursued trends. Small suspenders, hot pants, short skirts. As long as they were good-looking and could show off my figure and confidence, I liked to buy them and try them on. But after I met Hugo always taught me, women should dress dignifiedly and politely, generously. How can you walk beside me like this and attend important occasions with me? His words were full of contempt for those short skirts. But because of my blind love for Hugo, I still painfully put away those beautiful skirts that could show off my beauty. I began to learn how to dress decently and generously. Although, I don't like those knee-length old-fashioned suits, nor do I like being confined at home after work to cook for men. But I still learned to cook for Hugo. I restrained my hobbies of watching concerts, traveling, etc. For Hugo, I thought my change could make Hugo love me more. But in the end, besides wronging myself, I actually got nothing. I think it looks good is enough. What clothes I wear is not up to my ex-husband to interfere. Hugo narrowed his deep eyes, wanting to say something but stopped. I ignored his request. I strode out the door and took a taxi myself. Unexpectedly, Hugo followed me in his car all the way until he watched me enter the company before leaving. From this day on, every morning when I went to the company, I would receive a bouquet of flowers from Hugo. In the afternoon, coffee, cakes, and fruits would also be delivered one after another. No matter how I asked Hugo to stop ordering takeout for me, Hugo was as if he couldn't hear it. My colleagues' eyes were full of envy. "Kayla, I really envy you for finding such a good husband." If Hugo had done these things a month ago, I might have been more excited than anyone else. But now, looking at Hugo's belated love, my heart is only bitter. Hugo has always been unwilling to get a divorce. I can only ask a lawyer to help me go through the normal legal process. I thought I would see Hugo again in court, but this day Hugo's father called. "Your aunt has been in a bad mood recently, which caused her old illness to recur, and she was hospitalized again. She always talks about you. Can you come and see her?" Perhaps I will no longer care about Hugo, but for such good uncle and aunt, I still can't let go. At Hugo's father's sincere request, I brought flowers to the hospital, but before I even reached the ward, I saw two people hugging in the corridor. Laura hugged Hugo tightly, trembling weakly. "Brother Hugo, I am willing to be brave for you, and I will find a way to make uncle and aunt accept it. You said that you always have to find someone to marry and start a family, instead of reluctantly finding someone you don't love. Why? Why can't you choose the one you love?" Hugo just hugged Laura silently, without ever speaking. But Laura's words once again pierced my heart and made my heart ache. Reluctantly. What does it mean? So Hugo, from the beginning to the end, did you only regard me as a reluctant choice? 7. The heaviness in my chest made me keep sinking. Hugo's silence was perhaps the answer. Laura hid in Hugo's embrace and cried again, her voice choked with sobs. "I know that Sister Kayla is the type that uncle and aunt like, and she is the most suitable marriage partner for you. But a marriage without love is destined to not last long. Why do you have to choose Sister Kayla and make 3 people suffer? 3 people suffer. How could a selfish and self-centered man like Hugo suffer? In the end, the one who suffers, it's actually only me, right? And only I foolishly was hurt by these 2 people again and again." Tears of grievance and resentment welled up in my eyes unconsciously. I felt suffocated for no reason. Just when I was in a dilemma, Hugo's father's gentle voice called me back. "Kayla, you're here. Why don't you come in?" This voice also awakened Hugo at the same time. He turned his head suddenly and saw me, his face showing a rare panic. Laura also saw me. Her eyes were red with tears, still snuggling in Hugo's arms. From an angle that no one else could see, she stared at me provocatively. I pretended to be indifferent and looked at Hugo, awkwardly pushing Laura away. "Why are you here? Why didn't you say anything before you came?" "It was Uncle who asked me to come." I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked at Hugo coldly. "If I had notified you in advance, I wouldn't have had the chance to see the scene of you and Laura being so affectionate." The sarcastic words made Hugo look embarrassed. Laura, however, shed tears again, pitifully saying, "Sister Kayla, you misunderstood. Hugo and I." I raised my hand to interrupt Laura's words and turned to look at Hugo's father. "Uncle, I am already going through legal procedures and will be officially divorced from Hugo soon. I am very grateful for your love and care for me, but I want to tell you that the most suitable candidate for your daughter-in-law has actually been right under your noses." I calmly pointed to Laura and did what Hugo didn't dare to do. Instead of letting Hugo reluctantly marry me, it's better for him to choose the woman he loves to spend the rest of his life with. Hugo's father looked at the 2 of them in shock and anger. "Hugo, how could you do such a thing?" Hugo was speechless and did not get angry because of my unauthorized actions. On the contrary, I saw hesitation and struggle in his eyes. "But this has nothing to do with me anymore. Hugo, why don't we let each other go and live our own lives? Isn't that good?" After saying the last sentence, I couldn't hold back my tears and rushed out of the hospital. Feeling the warm sunshine shining on my head, I finally couldn't hold back anymore. I hugged my knees and squatted at the entrance of the hospital, crying loudly, Those tears were full of all the grievances I had suffered these days. I didn't care about other people's eyes and cried loudly. But while crying, I heard a slightly familiar voice beside me asking me, "Kayla, is that you?" I looked up in a panic, only to see an unexpected face. The company boss, Gideon, handed me a tissue while looking at me worriedly. "What's wrong with you?" 8. Gideon is usually cold and stern in the company, handling matters officially. But because of his handsome looks and fit figure, wearing a suit is enough to make him look impressive. Even if he is not approachable, he is also deeply loved by the young girls in the company. Seeing that he actually showed a compassionate side to me, I was also shocked to stop my tears. Hic. The complex emotions turned into an embarrassing hiccup under the shock. Gideon looked at me with a complicated expression and finally said lightly, "I'll pretend I didn't see you today. You can have the tissue." He didn't make me feel awkward, nor did he inquire too much about my privacy, and turned to enter the hospital. But I breathed a sigh of relief. Holding the tissue in my hand, I wiped away my tears. After calming down, I found a high-end restaurant and had a big meal. After eating and drinking to my heart's content, I returned home and saw the fruit that my mother bought for me again. I suddenly felt that the world was not so bad. There are always people in this world who care about you, aren't there? I called my mother and told her what I saw and heard today. After a long time of heartache, my mother also comforted me. "Hugo's matter, let it pass. Life is long, we must look forward. Maybe in the future there will be men who are much better than Hugo waiting for you ahead." I chuckled. I understand my mother's desire for me to be happy, but I also told her, I still want to focus my energy on my career in the future. Only money will never betray us. Everything is towards money, although it sounds very realistic. But money can bring people a 100% sense of security. The next day at the company, I pretended that nothing happened and called him as usual. "Good morning, CEO Gideon." After he took a deep look at me, he also nodded coldly as usual. I breathed a sigh of relief. Such a aloof man should be like Hugo. He won't care about the gossip of an ordinary employee, right? The days passed peacefully like this. After the hasty meeting at the hospital that day, Hugo didn't send me anything again, nor did he show up again. The divorce process is progressing in an orderly manner. I have also achieved good results in several new projects. The company also specially hosted a simple celebration banquet for the success of these projects. At the dinner table, Gideon took the initiative to toast me. "I have seen your work ability during this period. You have worked hard." My colleagues also praised me one after another, saying that they want to learn from me. The sense of accomplishment brought by work and the affirmation of others made my heart full. I gently clinked glasses with Gideon. I still want to thank CEO Gideon for giving me the opportunity. I drank the wine in one gulp. In the corner of my eye, I seemed to see Gideon looking at me with somewhat deep eyes again. After Gideon finished drinking the wine, he suddenly announced at the dinner table, "Next week, for the project to go to other places and connect with overseas customers, you will go with me." 9. Suddenly being valued by the boss, I also felt that my career luck was getting better and better. During the week-long business trip, Gideon also arranged the best hotel room for me. After having dinner with the client at night, we walked back to the hotel together. He also instructed me in the tone of a boss. "Remember to report to your husband when you go back, and tell him that this is just a pure business trip, so that he can rest assured." I was surprised. Gideon was so thoughtful, but after thinking about it carefully, it is not unreasonable. Anyone who is married or has a partner is very taboo about being alone with other opposite sexes, especially when it comes to such sensitive things as staying in a hotel together. Also being a high-ranking elite. Why can Gideon think of it? But Hugo can't think of it. With emotion, I smiled faintly. "I don't have a husband, I only have an ex-husband." Gideon opened his mouth, stared at me for 2 seconds, as if he understood something. But he didn't ask too much, nor did he mention the day he ran into me crying. I am very grateful to Gideon for being so considerate. It was also the first time that I mentioned this matter to someone other than my family. When you meet someone who is not suitable, it is the right choice to separate as soon as possible. After all, The lyrics will also sing, "Say goodbye to the wrong one to meet the right one." I stretched lazily with relief. It turns out that I can already face the setbacks and pains that Hugo brought me. Isn't this also a sign of growth? Gideon didn't say anything more. On the last day of the business trip, he suddenly mentioned, "I'll give you half a day off. You can go out shopping and relax." I came to this city and have been revolving around clients. It's rare for the boss to be gracious, and I'm happy to accept it. I simply visited the famous local attractions. In the evening, in order to thank Gideon, I offered to treat him to dinner. I took pictures of the food and posted them on social media, and also took tourist photos of myself with the help of passers-by. Gideon also slowly shed some of the airs of a boss and began to be able to chat with me about things other than work. On the day of the return trip, as soon as we got off the plane, Gideon stopped me. "Take my car. I'll have the driver take you back first." Looking at the long queue at the taxi waiting point and rubbing my sore waist, I couldn't refuse the boss's kindness. Sitting in the luxury car, I fell asleep groggily all the way. It took a long time for the car to stop before Gideon woke me up. "We're here." After saying goodbye, Gideon got out of the car with me and helped me get my luggage from the trunk. "You've worked hard this week. I'll give you half a day off tomorrow morning." I was overjoyed. How come it seems that after leaving Hugo, my luck with benefactors has suddenly improved? Just jumping and thanking Gideon, a furious male voice suddenly came from behind. "Kayla, who is this man? What is your relationship with him?" 10. I turned back in shock. Hugo, with obvious anger, strode toward me. He grabbed my wrist without hesitation. "I saw the photos you posted on social media. Have you been with this man all this time? To piss me off, to get revenge on me, you have actually become such a casual woman?" Hugo's misunderstanding and excessive wording infuriated me. I get rid of his hand and backed away from him. "Hugo, please show some respect. What I do with whom is none of your business." Gideon did not speak. Instead, he looked at Hugo with interest. Hugo was no longer as calm and restrained as he used to be. He forcefully grabbed my shoulder, his expression twisted. "Kayla, joking is one thing, but what do you mean by traveling with other men?" Looking at Hugo's red eyes and the blue veins popping out on his neck, I could almost smell the full of injured emotions on his body. I thought he could finally empathize with me. It's just that between us, after all, cannot be the same frequency. And my pain at that time was 1,000 times stronger than Hugo's emotions at this moment. "Mr. Hugo, what's the difference between your ugly appearance now and a mentally deranged person who has lost his mind?" Hugo's body stiffened, and his arms also drooped dejectedly. The knife that was used to be inserted into his heart. After a stalemate, it was Gideon who came forward to help me out. It's not appropriate for a soon-to-be ex-husband to pester his ex-wife, right? I pushed Hugo away again. "My business has nothing to do with you." Hugo rubbed his face helplessly and left step by step. Gideon did not offer too many opinions, only telling me to rest assured. However, just as one wave subsided, another rose. Before going to bed, my phone received a photo sent from an unknown number. In the photo, Hugo was sleeping peacefully, and in his arms, he was holding Laura, who was smiling brightly. For such a provocative act, I was actually indifferent. The next day, I woke up at noon before going to work. But as soon as I went downstairs, I saw Hugo again. He was no longer as smug and high-spirited as before. With dark circles under his eyes and a sloppy stubble, he handed me the coffee and cake he bought. "I originally wanted to buy it for you for breakfast, but I didn't expect you to come downstairs so late." Those cautious words made me wonder if the man in front of me was really Hugo. My heart was calm, just lightly pushing his hand away. "I don't like coffee." Hugo was shocked. "Kayla, don't lie to me, you used to clearly." "That's because you like it, so I am willing to pretend for you. In fact, I don't like bitter American coffee at all. But a cup of American coffee every day is Hugo's habit." In order to be able to close the distance with Hugo, in order to be able to get Hugo's appreciation, I disguised my preferences. And Hugo has never understood the real me. I turned to leave, but Hugo changed his usual composure and hurriedly chased after him. "Kayla, then you can tell me, what do you like?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I like you to disappear from my world and never appear in front of me again. 11. Hugo's body swayed, as if about to fall. This me must be very different from the gentle and sweet Kayla he knew. He stretched out his hand to me, then withdrew it tremblingly. Kayla, do you have to be so cruel to me? I showed a mocking smile, took out my phone and opened the photo I received last night. When you took Laura to a hotel on our wedding night, did you ever think about how cruel you were? I then opened Laura's social media account from that day, my tone calm. Presumably this social media post is only visible to me and was specially sent to me. Without hope and love for Hugo, I can finally reveal his hypocrisy with great momentum. I have already chosen to quit and fulfill you. Why do you still have to come and harass me in different ways? Help me tell Laura that if she dares to play this kind of trick again, then I don't mind letting the whole world know that she, Laura, is a lowly mistress who actively intervened in other people's marriage. I thoroughly showed my sharp-tongued side. Hugo's mouth opened and closed again, his eyes full of struggle, until I turned to leave again. Hugo hurriedly blocked me in front of me and finally spoke. That night Laura knew that I had registered with you and was threatening to commit suicide and even swallowed sleeping pills. In order not to prevent her from having an accident, I could only put her in a hotel and watch her. In Hugo's eyes there is regret, but more, it is a kind of despair of being afraid of losing me. Later, Laura kept talking about committing suicide, and I could only watch her all the time, and I didn't dare to stimulate her. The truth is so absurd. I smiled faintly and shook my head. In any case, between stimulating her and hurting me, you chose to hurt me. Am I wrong? Hugo tried to hug me helplessly. He was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. We had a relationship when we were young, and I have always cherished her. But after meeting you, I realized that you are the choice I want to spend my life with. 5 years of knowing Hugo, this is the first time I heard Hugo say such sincere words to me. But so what? Your so-called choice is nothing but the result of weighing the pros and cons, not out of love at all. I forcefully poked Hugo's chest, my smile full of irony. When you chose to hurt me for Laura, the answer was already obvious. Hugo, at this moment, I am only grateful. Hugo trembled unconsciously, looking at me in fear and confusion. Grateful for what? Grateful that you took Laura to the hotel that day, allowing me to escape from the sea of suffering early. Yes, the sea of suffering. For me, these 5 years with Hugo, it's just a sea of suffering that trapped me. For such a desperate situation, only by turning back in time can we reach the shore. Just take it as I beg you, for the sake of our past relationship. Please disappear from my world, and don't bother me anymore. Perhaps only when the words are said to this point, Hugo is willing to accept the reality. His head drooped in annoyance, still stubbornly wanting to pull me. I refused any contact with Hugo. Hugo, I am tired of being entangled with you. I will no longer be the woman who will always stay where she is, waiting to infinitely tolerate you. And you will eventually gain your freedom. Watching Hugo's back as he drove away, my heart was incomparably relaxed, as if I had completely walked out of that disturbing haze. In the days that followed, Hugo finally did not appear again. I blocked all his contact information and no longer felt interested in his whereabouts. Gideon also announced my promotion, and my life was once again smooth. Seeing the congratulatory message sent by Gideon privately, I also replied with thanks. Thank you for CEO Gideon's appreciation and promotion. I wonder if I can invite you to dinner to express my gratitude? Gideon replied quickly, but the content made my face inexplicably red. Yes, but not as a superior-subordinate relationship, but as another relationship. Are you willing to accept it?